All right, guys, I'm here with Nick Finzer. Nick, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
How's it going?
Going great. Just trying to keep all the plates spinning. Lots of things happening this fall. So yeah, just trying to keep everything balanced and keep moving.
Right on. So tell us where you are right now.
Right now, I'm at the University of North Texas in Denton, Texas, which is just outside of Dallas. This my second year teaching here at UNT. And so, yeah, that's where I am now. But yeah, back and forth between here and New York and all over, depending on the month.
Right. And so you're kind of back and forth between Texas and New York, but where are you originally from?
I grew up in Rochester, New York, so I know that upstate New York life.
Yes, of course. And I actually, it's more common for me to go south to New York from where I am in Albany than to go over to Rochester. It's kind of
For sure.
funny. People don't realize it if they're not from New York, which is that Rochester is far.
It's
Like it's
far
close.
from Albany, yeah.
Yeah, it's like 4 or 5 hours or something, and so New York City is actually closer, which is interesting, and interesting too. Like Philadelphia is closer to me than Rochester is, which
Oh,
is
really? I never
yeah,
thought about
yeah, which is funny. But yeah. So tell us a little bit about Rochester, growing up there, your musical background, and what your formative years were like.
that. Sure, yeah. Well, growing up in Rochester, I didn't know at the time, but there was a kind of a glut of great jazz education around for me to eventually access. That wasn't the original path for me, but um, I grew up in a high school out in a suburb outside of Rochester that had a pretty strong music program in all different areas. I was involved in, wind ensemble and choir and theater and just all different things. And then also in Rochester is the Eastman School of Music. And so when I was in high school, I started playing in a big band that met on Saturdays there and fell in love with the music of Duke Ellington and then ended up going to Eastman for my undergrad. And at the same time as that, the Rochester Jazz Festival, which is now a pretty great festival, pretty big festival, was in its infancy stage when I was in high school and starting college. And so got to kind of get to know the people that started that festival and be involved in the early days of that. And so now seeing that grow into such a huge thing is pretty great for the community there. And then, there's also a really great jazz radio station in Rochester. And so I didn't know how rare or lucky that was to have all those resources until later on. So sometimes, I might say like, oh, there's not that much happening in Rochester. I got to get out. But, for a city of that size, there's a lot of great music happening, a lot of great musicians in the area. And yeah, so it was really a fertile place to grow up and, there was opportunities to, I had a band and since high school playing, different clubs and stuff. And, but I always had it in my brain that after undergrad, I was going to go to New York. And so that was always the goal and my focus kind of singularly from, 10th or 11th grade, the first time I went to New York on. I was just like, that's what I'm doing. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I'm going to make it happen. So that eventually in 2010, that happened.
Of course, I love it. So let's back up a little bit, and if you could just tell us a little bit about how the trombone entered your life and how it came to be that you are a trombone player, because trombone is not an easy instrument.
Well, I've always been kind of tall for my age, and so I put down in elementary school my little preference sheet. It said drums, trumpet, and trombone. And they said, oh, trombone. Yeah, well, you're tall. You're going to play trombone. So at first I had no idea what I was getting myself into, obviously. But I had some really great like friends that also played trombone. Like all of us became kind of friends in elementary school. And that kind of pushed me through. And I had one really good friend who we were in high school together and then at Eastman together. And so kind of without that person, his name is Rick, and without him, I don't think I would have been kind of pushed in the direction that I was. Both of us were very good friends, but also kind of competitive with one another. So it was a good spirit to try to drive us both forward. But around that time in middle school, I had a really great band director who showed me the Eastman trombone choir, which was actually one of the first schools to ever have a trombone choir, and there's a very rich, deep kind of trombone history at Eastman. For anyone that cares. And so I kind of was like in a right place to be able to go down and like hear them, and I kind of fell in love with the instrument from there, and wanted to be a classical player. And then when I auditioned for like the youth symphony and realized how stressful that was, and like preparing excerpts and trying to play this thing perfectly and exactly like everyone told me how to play it, I realized that it was not for me, and moved in a different direction. But so that's kind of how trombone entered my life. But it's always stuck with me. You know, I tried to stay involved with both sides of the music, and it just has a good sound in a group. You know, not every instrument sounds good in a group.
Definitely, man. And I'm a saxophone player, and I like to say that playing the saxophone is my longest standing habit. And it really is. So you just pick it up, and it just kind of sticks with you like glue. So, but that isn't to say that there aren't days where I want to throw it in the trash, as I'm sure you know. But
Oh yeah.
So, were your parents and your family always relatively supportive of your decision to do music, or did they kind of push you towards it at all, or did they kind of want you to do something safer? What was the story there?
Well, I guess it was both. They were both very, very, very supportive and also very trepidatious at the same time. My mom is a flutist, and my parents both also grew up in upstate New York, and she was going to attend Ithaca College for music, and then she decided to not do that and get married instead. So she kind of always had this thing in the back of her mind about what would have happened if, you know, she had gone into music. So she was always supportive of any decisions that I made in going in that direction, which was really great, you know, looking back. My dad was a little bit more practical. He demanded that I have a backup plan. Wanted me to get a music education degree or a business degree, just kind of double major. At that time at Eastman, you couldn't really do a double degree with the university that it's associated with. Now you can, but you couldn't at that time when I started. But I just said, no, I'm not going to do that, because if I have a backup plan, I'm going to fall back on the backup plan. So I'm going to go with no net and go and if I fail, I fail, and then I'll figure it out something else. So they were supportive. They were definitely supportive, 100%. But there was like the little bit of tension of like, what are you going to do with yourself and all of this? But things have turned out just fine, and so they've continued to be supportive, and so it kind of worked out. There wasn't like any huge blow up moment, but there was definitely always tension between my dad and I, of like, what are you going to do? Are you sure you can make money doing this? So you know, that's a real conversation. But, you know, I kind of really did believe and do believe that if you are dead set on being a performer, that you really have to, you know, put yourself in a situation where it's either sink or swim, because if you want to make it, you're going to make it happen, you know. And if maybe it wasn't for you, then you'll figure it out pretty fast. You know, I think that real world experience is super, super important at some point in your career to figure it out.
Yeah, and of course you have to have empathy for your parents, you know, because they just want you to be successful, obviously. Hopefully. And so it's not unreasonable for them to be concerned about making money as a musician, because it is a very hard career, especially in, you know, 2019. You have to basically do everything yourself. No record label is going to, you know, hand you a career, you know,
Right.
as it somewhat used to be. And so you got to have empathy for that, but at the same time, the results speak for themselves, you know. And so I think it's something that parents will eventually reconcile with, you know, when you're successful, which you seem to be doing okay. So I think that
Things have worked out so far.
yes, it's so far so good, as they say. So so you're at Eastman. Tell us like an average day of practicing and playing, and what Eastman was like.
Ooh, well, it kind of changed a lot during the course of time there. From freshman year on. I mean, I think there was always a lot of practicing involved, but I was always someone who wanted to build other things in addition, meaning I always had a teaching studio. So I was always teaching, and I would teach like area groups, like maybe a high school marching band or something like that. So I would be like always kind of running around and teaching and playing. Luckily, what playing opportunities there were in Rochester, I was kind of connected to because I was from there. So I knew, who the people were. So I was kind of always gigging from the time I started school, which was not the case for everybody, just because they didn't know who to know, in order to get gigs where the music was happening. But it kind of changed a lot between freshman year and junior year. By the time it was junior year, I was teaching like 20 students a week, and I was kind of more focused on my professional career than school for sure by the time senior year happened. But freshman and sophomore year, I was really I wanted to get into like the top ensembles at school, and like there was just a sense that I knew somehow that I felt like I was really far behind and I had a lot to catch up on. So I was really focused on trying to get those things together. During that time, I was also studying with Wycliffe Gordon, who was in the Jazz Lincoln Center Orchestra. So I was like driving down from Rochester to the city like once a month or so, or every couple of months to get lessons. And so I was trying to do that. And I don't know, it was kind of a blur looking back, but it was definitely a lot of practicing and a lot of just like head down, getting as much experience as I could, playing and saying yes to every single gig. Maybe to the detriment of my personal life, but it was like I wasn't really hanging out. I wasn't, going to parties and stuff. I was like at gigs or like hanging out, doing anything that someone asked me to do. I just wanted to get experience doing everything because I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. I just knew that I wanted to play, and I wanted to be somebody who you could call and I would do a great job regardless of what it was, whether it was jazz or something else.
So you finished at Eastman, and when do you move to New York? And just on a very practical level, how did you make that happen?
So I took a year off after school, solely focused on getting into grad school. I skipped a grade in elementary school, so I felt like I just kind of put that extra year at the end instead of in the middle. So I took a year off, and I had always wanted to get into Juilliard, and I didn't get in for my undergrad. And so it was a kind of a chip on my shoulder kind of moment where I was like, I'm going to freaking do this. And so I took a whole year off to do that. And my plan was I was either going to go to Juilliard or MSM, or I was going to move to New York. So I was saving money. Like I said, I was working a lot. And so I was saving money and doing that. And then luckily it worked out that I got accepted to Juilliard. And Manhattan, and I decided to go to Juilliard. It seemed like one of those things when it comes along, like I should probably do this, and so I did that, and that's kind of what got me to New York. Like I said, I was saving money and stuff like that in case I needed to do it on my own and figure it out, but that didn't happen that way. So grad school basically brought me to New York and connected me with a lot of the players that I play with, all the time, and it was really just kind of the best community of musicians to get to know once I was there.
Yeah, and I think that's a really common, use for school, which is to be in the city that you want to be in while you're in school, and it's a great bridge for being able to move to a place that you want to be. So I think that is super cool. So once you graduate from grad school, tell us about what kind of gigs you're playing, who you're playing with, what those first few years out of school were like.
Sure. Yeah. So I finished in 2012, my master's, and right before graduation, the week before graduation, I recorded my first record in between the last day of class and graduation. So I had that kind of together with the most of the same band that's my band now, and so we did that. The kind of gigs I was playing was any type of gig that would come my way. Luckily, Eastman, like I said, has a really strong trombone kind of history. So there's a lot of trombonists in New York from Eastman that I was able to connect with. And I was subbing on Broadway shows and doing that. And I got connected with a couple, corporate bands and playing all the regular kind of party band stuff that you do to make money. And some of those same people connected me into, there's a huge like Orthodox Jewish wedding scene that is kind of totally off the radar and I would never have known about, but it's work just like any other work. And so I was doing that, and I wasn't playing necessarily that many jazz gigs, but I really was focused on, there's a couple of people that I really wanted to play with. One of those people was Maria Schneider and her jazz orchestra. So I used to go and just actually sell CDs at the Jazz Standard during the week of Thanksgiving when they would play there. That was something I made like an annual thing. I'm going to do that because I want to be around and I want to meet these people and doing all that kind of stuff. And then I started playing with a group that got relatively well known called Postmodern Jukebox, which is like this YouTube cover band basically. And so around that time, 13, 14, they started touring internationally. So I started kind of doing a bunch of stuff with them and started doing that kind of on and off from, 13 to 16. And then from 2014 to 2016, I got a visiting professor gig at Florida State University. So I was down there a couple days a week teaching. I know this is a long answer to your question, but they kind of all that stuff was all coalescing kind of at the same time. And I was trying to keep all the things going, the teaching and the playing in New York and the touring and making my own records. But started playing with like the Gil Evans Project, which is a big band led by Ryan Truesdell. I did some subbing in the Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra around that time, 14 or 15. Did some touring with them. So that's the long, short answer.
Yeah. So is playing in a big band format something that you've always inherently enjoyed? Because, as a trombone player, I think it's safe to say that there's less, small group work for trombone players. There's a lot of big band work. And so can you just talk a little bit about that and how you connect with it?
Well, how I connect with it is that was my connection to jazz in the first place. The music of Duke Ellington was the music that hit me first in the jazz area. And so that from that time on, that trombone section, that band has always been in my ear. So, and you're right. So trombone players have to play in sections a lot. You're not always getting to play Art Blakey tributes and there's a trombone player in the band or something like that. It's, it's one of those extra instruments after saxophone and trumpet, and that's fine. But so we end up playing a lot of like, salsa gigs and big band gigs. But I love playing in a big band. It's great. I also love playing in a small group. A lot of the bands that I play with now, I find kind of have a hybrid of the two skill sets kind of put together, kind of like nonettes or 10-piece bands. I have kind of been an area where I've been able to work a lot. So it's been a case where you have to have a kind of a strong solo voice and be able to play in an ensemble. And that's something that, going to school at Eastman was like so important in terms of developing that like ensemble awareness. That's definitely something I felt like when I observed the undergrads at Juilliard, something that they were not getting because they didn't have the same requirements in terms of playing in other kinds of non-jazz ensembles. But that's a conversation for another day perhaps. But yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the most important things that you think about when you are playing in a trombone section of maybe not necessarily jazz, but maybe a big band or any kind of large group setting. What are the main things that you think about?
Well, that's a good question. Playing very as close as I can to whoever's playing the lead part. Trying to match the style, trying to support that person. If I am that person, I'm trying to lock in with the other sections. I always say you have to be listening more to everybody else than to yourself. You shouldn't really hear yourself at all. You should just know that you're doing the right thing, you're playing the right thing, and you're trying to make it as musical as you can with the people around you. Just making sure that the section is really together, has great time and a great sound. Those are the important things. I think it's something you never. Trombone sections in general are something you never miss until they're gone. If you hear a big band, there's a great trombone section. If you take it away, you'll notice a big difference. It's like that. The saxophones is a big part of the sound too, but the trombone section, there's something about the quality of the sound that really kind of fattens up the middle of the ensemble. So if you're missing it out, or if it's really sloppy or it doesn't have a good sound, it can be detrimental. But
is reading and sight reading something that you consciously worked on, or did you just kind of get better at it through experience?
Oh no, I consciously worked on it. I wanted to be a perfect sight reader, and I still strive to be a perfect sight reader. I think it should be the expectation is that I'm going to play it right the first time. And that's always been my expectation of myself. So I've held myself to that standard because I just like, I want to practice what I want to practice. So I want to be able to sight read it a way that I don't have to practice my ensemble music. I wanted to be able to play it right the first time. So that was the first thing. And then there was just too many people that came to visit school and give master classes that said, oh yeah, you got to sight read it right the first time, that I just said, okay, that's just the expectation. And so I've just always had that expectation that was what it was going to be. I had a teacher who made me sight read every single lesson. So it was not a foreign thing. Like, we did it all the time. And it was just something that became an expectation. And so that's how I try to instill in my students. It's like not really a question. It's like not really a skill. You just do it. You just do it right. Like, you just read it like you're reading a book. And sometimes, of course, we're all going to screw up, but it's like, that's just the expectation that I have.
Are there any books or resources that you could point people towards that you found very valuable in learning to improve your sight reading skills?
Oh no, just get as much music and sight read it all, just different styles all the time. Sight read, make it just a part of something you do either every week or every day, and just all different things. And so that's why I try to do that to my students. We sight read something different, whether it's a tune, trying to sight read changes, a big band part, transcription, reading tenor clef, reading treble clef, all different kinds of stuff. So just keep reading different stuff. Get as much music as you can. I mean, you can find anything you want is online. So just go and read everything.
Definitely. I like that a lot. I think that's a good way to put it. So obviously education has always been a very big part of your career in music, whether that's teaching privately or teaching at UNT like you're doing now in more of a formalized setting. So besides sight reading, what are some other topics that you find that are often lacking in students' level of preparation, and things that you try and get them to focus on?
It's a great question as well. Often lacking is an awareness of the ensemble playing. I mentioned that before. A level of awareness of just like musicality that's outside of the technique of their instrument. A lot of times we get caught up like, oh, I got to be able to play at this tempo or this fast or blah, 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 blah. When for me, the most important things to focus on are developing a really great sound, because if you don't sound good, nobody really wants to call you back. You can make a lot of mistakes, but have a great sound and get called back, because you bring that personality. When you think about Miles Davis, John Coltrane, all the great artists, you think about the first thing is not like, oh, how many notes did they play? It's the sound that pops, at least to me, into my mind's eye or ear. When I think of Monk, I think about his sound. I don't think about what notes he played, So that's something that I find sometimes is lacking. And then something more recently that I found and discovered about students that are coming to jazz school is that I'm not sure that they all come to jazz school because they like jazz. I think they come because it's not classical music. And it kind of gets lumped into, oh, well, I'll just get a jazz degree because it's not classical and it's not music education. And I think that's because there's not a lot of options in terms of like, you can't major in horn section playing. It's not really a thing. So at the moment anyway. And so I find that there's a lot of people that are going to school for jazz that maybe don't actually like jazz that much, which is kind of interesting to me. And I guess that's because my own personal experience is there's so much tunnel vision going on that I didn't have an awareness that there were other people going to school that maybe that weren't obsessed with that thing. And so I find that to be interesting, but I find the weakest things is just like developing their ears. People don't learn tunes by ear. They have iRealB app, and that's like my least favorite app. I'm starting to sound like an old man about these things. I'm like, man, that happened really fast. All of a sudden, I'm on the other side of that. But just a crutch on things like that. Just not learning tunes, just like pulling out the changes on their phone and stuff. And not that I think you need to know every tune, but your ear should be good enough that you can at least play simple tunes without having to read them off the iRealB. But yeah, those are a couple of things.
Definitely. And, maybe it's a different story if you're, trying to read stablemates or something, but if it's some diatonic tune and you can't hear it, that's a problem. I think
It's
you would
kind of, yeah,
agree.
it's like, I'm not so sure if you're going on the right path here, or you haven't put in the time to develop your ears yet, which you should probably do.
How would you go about developing your ears, or how did you? And what are some things that you have your students do in order to develop their ears, besides, the obvious things like listening and
Sure.
transcribing?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. First of all, the first thing is to know that it's going to suck. You're going to suck at it, especially if you don't have perfect pitch, which I do not. And it was really hard for me. But first, yeah, that first thing, realizing it's going to suck, knowing it's going to suck, knowing it's going to take more than a week, is like, you just have to be patient is the first thing, and do the work. Singing, number one, is really important. Being able to sing whatever you're working on. I always did choir. I was talking about that, and I never thought was all that relevant until I had to do, oral skills class in college, and then I was like, oh, it's a good thing I sang a lot, because now I don't have to work that hard at this class. But so singing is really important, and the single most important thing that I ever did, number one, was throw away my giant stack of real books and decide that I was going to learn all the tunes by ear and learn them all on the piano. So I don't play piano very well, but I play enough to figure out the changes to tunes and accompany my students. And they will tell you badly, but just enough to get by. And that one thing developed my ears more than anything else. But there's some other great tools that I love. There's an app that Stefan Harris put out called Harmony Cloud. I really like that app. And there's a million things online for like learning intervals and all that stuff. But I find like all that stuff you can learn pretty easily. I feel like it's the hearing chord changes, the hearing the root movement, hearing the quality of extensions is something that's more difficult. But the thing to do is you just have to do it. Like, it's going to suck, but just keep trying until you get it. Because once you get it, then you're going to be so happy you did. And, the only thing that got me to do it was once I got to grad school and I had to learn way more tunes than I even knew in the course of a year. And I was like, I have to get a new system for this. And so that's what I did. That's what you should do. Learn the piano. Or if you already play piano, you probably already have pretty good ears.
Yes, in most cases, or perfect pitch always helps, but not all of us have that. So,
Exactly.
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, and one other thing that I think is highly underrated is just incremental improvement. And so you say, yes, it's going to suck, but if you can, have your ears be a little bit better, 1% better, or a tenth of a percent better the next day, then that just compounds over time. And I think that's pretty much how you get better.
Exactly. You're exactly right. That hit the nail on the head.
Cool. So one thing that I also wanted to touch on is your YouTube channel, because that is also a place where you are graciously sharing a lot of tips and other informative material. And so when do you release those videos? It's once per week, right?
Yeah, I try to at minimum do one a week, and those come out on Wednesday mornings usually. And they kind of alternate between being like what you're talking about, educational content, and then some also performance content. So sometimes there's more than that per week, but I strive for one a week, and I've done at least one a week since 2016 spring. So it's been a couple of years now.
Right on. And I would definitely encourage everyone to go check that out. If you just search Nick Finzer, I'm sure you'll find it. And so I wanted to ask you about that, because what makes you actively decide that you want to make an educational video about a topic? Because there's obviously a gajillion topics that you could touch, but what is the impetus for you to actually sit down and record a video and try and get some information out into the YouTube sphere regarding that topic?
A lot of it is stuff that I share with some people in real life and in non-YouTube life. I guess it is real life. YouTube is also real life, but like in person, like somebody comes to a lesson, I'm like, man, I really got to come up with something like why is this so hard for this person? Or like, what is it that I do that allows me to do this particular thing that maybe somebody else hasn't practiced? So that's usually what it is. It's a real life experience. It's a one-on-one thing with a student. It's seeing the same thing with 10 students and being like, man, what could we do that would be helpful? And then taking that and turning it into some kind of exercise, either short or long. Some of them are pretty long, some of them are pretty short. So I don't know. I decided in 2016 16 after I was leaving this visiting professor gig that I had, that I was like, all right, if I'm going to leave this, what am I going to do with my time, with that extra time? I'm not flying to Florida once a week and teaching. So I decided, all right, I'm going to do a YouTube channel. And because, there's a lot of times I get messages from people on Instagram, like, I'm in such and such place, I can't afford to go to college and all this kind of thing. I'm like, well, they should be able to practice jazz stuff too. I mean, they shouldn't have to go and spend, whatever amount of money. That's a lot in most cases for college to study this jazz music, when you can find out about anything else on YouTube. Why shouldn't there be like jazz trombone stuff? And I noticed, that I have a couple colleagues on YouTube who do trombone stuff, but a lot of them don't focus on the educational, at least jazz education aspect of it. So I was like, oh, well, it's not a huge amount of people out there that want this information, but I know that they're there because I get the emails. So let me just answer this once instead of 100 times and put it on YouTube.
Right on. So maybe the college thing is something we can touch on a little bit too. What heuristics would you use or recommend someone use for deciding whether or not they should pursue a degree in music?
An undergraduate or a graduate?
Let's say undergraduate.
Undergraduate. If they should check it out. I think if they are really passionate about it and they feel like it's something they want to try and see if they can do. It's like, people always put it to me like, if you think you could do anything else, you should do that thing that's anything else. I don't know if I agree with that 100%, that statement. I think undergrad is supposed to be a time of exploration. I don't think you need to have it figured out by the time you're 18. I think it's put on people that they need to figure it out by middle school, and then high school is just about getting into college and whatever. Maybe it's changing. I think it is changing probably for the next generation. But for people my age, that was the vibe. It was figure out what you're going to do and go that direction from like 9th grade, 10th grade. So first of all, don't feel like if you go into music that you're like, I'm committing to this right now, and try to go to a place where you can do multiple things. Juilliard is amazing, but you can't really have a diverse experience there in terms of if you also want to check out business or math or anything, astronomy, whatever. It's just, one thing I like about UNT is that the students have to take classes in other parts of the school because it gives them that chance to see, non-music college level instruction and how smart those professors are. It's just a totally different thing from like music professors. Not that music professors aren't smart, but it's like people are more like, I feel more specialized. I guess it's just as specialized, but just in something that you're too familiar with rather than unfamiliar. But anyway, so I think a undergraduate shouldn't feel like they're tied into it. They should, you got to be really passionate about it though, and feel like this is really something that I want to be able to do for the rest of my life. But then have a kind of go to somewhere where there's a diverse experiences that you can have in terms of education, and also know that you should consider the finances. And a music degree is not like getting a law degree or a doctor. You're not going to earn exponentially more based on how prestigious your degree is, and it's more about the teacher and you growing as a person and going out and getting things and making things happen than it is about like where you went. So you can go to a lot of places and get a lot of the same information. It's just going to be how much time and effort you put into it, and the community that is around. Like I was saying, at Juilliard, there's a great community of other students that really pushed me to just as much as the faculty did. So you got to be really passionate, but also don't feel like you're stuck. Like it's not the end decision. Like if you want to check it out, go and check it out and see if it's something that you want to explore for your life.
Yes, definitely. And I think one thing that could not possibly be overstated is follow the money, for lack of a better term, because to like you're saying, do an undergraduate and explore whether or not music is the right thing for you. If you're getting, $100,000, $200,000 in debt to figure out what you want to do, that might not be the best option. And I think you probably agree with that.
I agree with you. I agree. I mean, I can't even fathom. I'm not going to bring up any particular schools, but there's certain tuition amounts, and I'm like, are you kidding me? But yeah, just be careful. As somebody that went to schools that aren't cheap, and doing fine, I'm doing fine, but that money is there, and it sits back here, and every once in a while there's like little gremlins that kind of run up, and you have to deal with them. So you just, don't don't not consider it.
Yes, and it was just like you were saying too. I mean, I think it's probably the case that for the most part you can be as good as you want to be, because it doesn't matter at a certain level. It doesn't matter which school you're at. It doesn't necessarily matter. It's not of utmost importance who your teacher is, because at the end of the day, you have to practice. You have to put in the work.
Right.
And so I think that, in that sense, sometimes when you consider the financial burden of going to, a really prestigious school, without a scholarship, then, you might consider other options.
Definitely. There's a lot of options out there, especially now. So, yeah, don't get yourself in a mountain of debt if you're not sure. If you're sure, it might be worth it, it might be. But if not, you can always come back later. You don't have to go to school to be a great musician. That's for sure.
That is definitely for sure. And so let's jump ahead a little bit. And I wanted to talk about your record label, which is Outside In Music.
Mm-hmm.
And my main question is, you started a record label, and my main question is why?
Why? That's a good question. I started it out of lack of patience, I suppose. From my first record, I decided I made it, like I was saying before, and then we were like, how am I going to get this out? I asked a bunch of people. They all said, we could do it, but not till, a year from now or something like that. And I was like, well, I'm not waiting that long. And so I decided to go it on my own and figure it out. And that's kind of just been my kind of personality for a little while. Just like, I'm not going to wait for these people. And then, so I just started it not thinking much of it. I was just going to do my first record, and it was whatever. And so I just started it on CD Baby and put it out, and that was fine. And then I did another project of mine, put it out on a different label, and learned more things, discovered that I wanted, number one, like more input into how it went, how everything went. And then I also realized that I spent more money than I needed to, a lot more money than I needed to, because I didn't understand how to assemble a team to work the release in coordination with the label. So after that second record, I decided to go back to my thing. And I'm like, all right, let's see if I can make this into something, at least for me. And so the third record I made, I put it out on my label. And then the only reason that it grew past that is because my friends started to ask me questions. How do I do this? How do I do that? And I'm like, well, just send it to me. I can do it in 5 minutes. It's going to take me, it'll be faster for me to do this for you than to explain it to you. So just send it to me. So I started doing those things, just like kind of like, how do I do the ISRC codes? What are ISRC codes? Where do I get a UPC barcode? Where do you print the CD? All these like little tiny questions that I was like, oh, I can just put this together for you. So then I just started distributing other friends' music, and then I just kind of more and more people started asking, and I put out music with another label and had another experience that I wasn't totally positive about. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do this myself for real. And so basically around the same time, around 2016, 2017, I started going more serious about it. I wanted to build something that was more than a record label. I usually call it a media company, because we focus on the 360 experience of the release, not just the music or printing CDs. That's kind of the last thing that I really care about. There's not very many people that care about having the CDs except for the industry people and a few people like your mom that want to have your CD, and and other people. But there's not everyone wants a CD, and so we're trying to move away from that, focus on video content and focus on content around your music. And so we also focus on doing a broad range of artist services and social media management, and just kind of coming at it from all different angles and trying to help people to participate in the 2020 and beyond music landscape, rather than just saying, I wish people bought CDs.
Yep. I mean, a lot of people do wish that people still bought CDs, but the reality is cars aren't being made with CD players anymore.
Exactly.
They're not. Neither are laptops. Like the laptop I'm recording this on, it doesn't have a CD
Mine either
player.
has no CDs.
Yeah.
I have hundreds of my own records, and I literally have nowhere to play them. So, and I run the label. So there you go.
Exactly. So what are some things about starting and managing a record label that you wish that you knew before you started it?
Well, I never started it with the idea that it was going to be a big thing. So, and it's not really a big thing. I'd say it's a small thing that's growing fast. But I wish I had known